What a fun day. I had a great day. This was awesome. It was not Monster Hunter World, Mantle Hunter World. That's what it was about. I had to go back and figure out. I need options, man. I need options. I know there's things because we've just been pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And there's just things that have been left behind. Like, if you look at my master rank stuff in the DLC, I've barely done any of the optional stuff. All the side quests they give you to, like, upgrade the canteen, upgrade this and that, the harvester, or anything like that. I haven't done any of it at all. The only thing I ever did was upgrade the, like, vitality mantle and the thunderproof cloak. That was it. That was the only things I'd done. So I was looking at this and I'm like, oh man, there's so much here. Little did I know how much I had missed, even from the base game, which practically was complete. Anything that had sort of like, this is a quest, was done. All done. There was, I think, 5 optional things remaining for me to do when I went and checked what we had to do. But I knew I was missing things. That was the important thing. I know I'm missing things because I didn't have, like, the fireproof cloak. I didn't have, like, if there's a wind cloak. I didn't have any of those things. I'm like, these are kind of important now because the damage that these enemies are doing, certainly looking at, like, raging brackers, etc., is overwhelming. So we need to go back. Now I'm doing this blind, okay? We'll get to that. We'll get to that because, oh boy, it just, this hole keeps digging and digging and digging and digging and digging and digging, and it's like, oh wow, we just found another thing. It's kind of like Terraria. The further down you go, you're like, oh my god, what the hell is happening now? I'm in like some sort of mushroom cave. So I went back. Now, first things first, I hadn't been back to Asteria in a really long time because we've been doing DLC stuff. And it turns out that at some point, I don't know when, it could have been days ago, it could have been a week ago, I have no idea, I had done the quest for the fireproof mantle. The armory lady just had a quest for me. I went up and she went, oh, you completed the quest. I'm like, did I? When did I do that? Like, I have no idea. And she went, oh, here's the fireproof cloak. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, that's the thing. Cool. So, I was like, right, how does this work? Because I distinctly don't remember doing it, but whatever. So I went back to my menu and I had like some really weird optional quests. And actually, this got stranger and stranger for me. And I had a couple of special assignments to kill, like Joe. I had to kill Joe and I had to kill a boss that I forgot about called Kush. But mostly I had like 3 Diablos kills to do in the arena. I had like normal Diablos, I had black Diablos, I had Teostra to kill, I had Teostra and Lunestra to kill. So I was like, right, I'm going to get these things done. I'm in Master Rank gear. It's not going to take us too long. Let's crash through this and see if something happens. And in fact, I think I had one to get Toby. Like a low rank Toby. Sure enough, when I killed low rank Toby, a quest popped up. It had no quest associated with killing Toby other than it was in my optional menu. But I came back, and sure enough, there was a quest waiting for me to get another specialized tool. I can't actually remember which one it was now. It was one that I think it was Apothecary, which is not a bad cloak, but I'm not doing elemental damage right now, which is a problem for Alatreon. But like, right now, I was like, oh, okay. So things do happen when we're doing these optional quests. It's just that it doesn't tell you something's going to happen, and it could be any of them. I think this is how this works. So, I was like, well, we'll just do the rest. Did Diablos? Nothing happened. Did Black Diablos? Nothing happened. Did Toby high rank? Nothing happened. I was like, okay. Nothing's happening here. So, I went and did Teostra. Nothing happened. I went and did Lunestra and Teostra. Something happened. I think it was that one. I'm going to get confused through this as to which ones actually caused something to happen. I don't think... Actually, it might not have been that one. I'm not sure if something came from that. However, the only thing that was left then, I'm like, huh. So what I did is I asked my general question, which is, have we got all the mantles? Because I don't know. The answer was no. I'm like, okay. So where do I go from here? So the only thing that was left was the special assignments. I went and killed Joe. Like, special assignment Joe. Which was easy because of my gear, but, like, he's one of the harder base game fights. And that got really strange. That went, there's new optional quests available. I'm like, what? Why? And the optional quests were to kill, like, the bird. Like the basic bird from the FF14 quest. I forget his name, but like the bird who loves his rock. I'm like, why would this be the follow-up quest to killing Joe? This is like a base game version. Weird. And then I went and did some other things. And at one point, I did something which gave me the temporal mantle, which was very cool. That thing was really cool. And I'm not sure which thing I did to get it exactly, but I got it. And I was like, this thing is very cool. It auto-dodges for you. Now, it does have a certain amount of charges, so it will run out. It'll stay up for like a minute and a half, I think, something like that. But it will, like, if you just like just stand still and it auto dodges for you 5 times, it'll run out. But still, very, very cool, and maybe a good counter to the Vitality Mantle, which is just based on damage, which can be done in 2 hits. This thing will nullify more hits than that. So that seems very like a really good upgrade. And then I went again. So do I have all the mantles now? No. Oh God. So what's left? And I'm like, maybe events, right? Maybe events. So I'm looking through, and some of the events, of which there's a lot, there's like 5 pages of events, have some really weird wording. And I'm like, oh, maybe they are buried in here. But I thought, I kind of leaned towards the events being cosmetics, because I got a Mega Man skin for the cat from there. And one of them's like, doing this will unleash a mighty weapon. And I'm like, oh, okay. There are some weirdly words here. So a lot of them just say they'll give you tickets or whatever, but then there's some really weirdly worded one. And then I found another one which said, I was hunting a large Jagras, and then a weird shadow appeared. I'm like, a shadow? Well, that could be a mantle, right? So I went and did that. This turns out this is actually really fun. Super fun, because obviously a Jagras is not hard. But at one point, he like decided to go down to the beach and drink the ocean and became mega fat Jagras and just started vomiting gems all over the floor. I was like, oh, it's a gem farm. Oh, that's kind of cool. It's a base game gem farm, so they're not going to be like mega gems from the DLC, but like, it's still cool. And I did pick up a couple of nice gems from there. And I was like, this is really fun. What a good, fun, silly way of doing things, of just having it vomit them out all over the floor via a special repeatable event. I was like, that's all right. That's pretty cool. So I was looking through these events again, and I'm like trying to pick through them and weave through them. And I couldn't see one which pointed towards a mantle. At which point, apparently, because obviously I'm playing without my chat being visible, a decree was made. I didn't have the chat open for most of the day, but a decree was made. And Chris came in and went, look, it has been decreed that you are never going to find how to do these mantles. Because the only way you would have found them is if you were playing the base game for fun, way after you've done the story and stuff, and had actually, like, explored all these other options. Because now we're in, like, they're buried behind certain achievements sort of territory. And I'm like, okay. And it's like, you need to investigate something called tempered monsters. Now, I had heard the phrase before. In fact, I think it's during the podcast that I had with Rurikan. And a reminder, the full spoiler reveal podcast will be on Monday. At 5 p.m. UK time. And it was brought, I was like, well, there's things like tempered monsters, but you're never going to encounter them, so don't worry about it. I was like, okay. And that was it. That's it. So I assumed they were just like harder monsters that are just there for fun. But no, it turns out there's some tempered monsters out there that, what are they? This is where, once again, and this is really funny to see for me, is the people who know just assume people should know. But the way it's displayed in game is not good at all. It's not clear enough for a newcomer in my mind. So I went back through the tutorials to find tempered monsters. Like, oh, occasionally on expeditions, you will find tracks which lead to tempered monsters. These are much larger, scarier versions, blah, 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 blah. Okay, now it turns out that there are tempered monsters in my events list. So I'm flicking through and I can't see anything that says tempered. And then it's like, it's the ones with a purple outline. I'm like, okay, so it's the ones with a purple outline. And you go over that, and nowhere on this screen whatsoever does the word tempered appear. The same for the investigations. There are tempered monsters investigations. And the way you know is that there is a purple reward icon. But when you mouse over it, it gives you, this is what I find funny, right? And I'm not complaining, because once you realize it, you realize it. I'm just saying it's really funny to me that they give you a full sheet of information. Location, size, campsites, type of monster, reward list, all this. At no point does it say the word tempered. At any point. It's just that this one has a purple reward icon. The other one has a purple outline aside. So it just doesn't say the word tempered or even put like a capital T in front of it or something like that. Like just simple basic things when we talk about UI problems. Because this came across in the podcast. Rurikhan was confused. And I think a lot of the audience were, if that message is coming through him, is that you were complaining about the UI. I'm not complaining about the actual UI. It's very clean. Like, the actual gameplay is very clean. It gives you a full immersive experience. They try not to block too much information. They try and push things off to the sides, which has pros and cons, because a lot of your button presses while you're doing combos constantly change in the top, so it's a little awkward to be, like, looking up and like, okay, I can do this, this, and this. But they give you, like, a clean, immersive experience. We're talking about the menu system, the buried tutorials, the multiple screens of the same information, but they're not quite the same information. So if you find one, you feel like you've looked, but it's actually another one. Things like this, where it's like, just say tempered. We get it, it's denoted by the purple, right? But you can also just say tempered, right? So it's a minor thing. It's just one of those things that you notice where it's like, you can also just say tempered. Instead of it being like, well, we put it in like a 3-page tutorial for you. It's like, dude... You have, at this point, I think I have 11 screens of tutorials, right? And I know a lot of people argue, it's like, you should read every tutorial all the time. It's like, dude, yeah, sure. But when you play a lot of games like I do, it gets very tiresome to just sit and stop gameplay to read 11 pages of tutorials, right? But either way, minor thing. So I went on this, and I was a little worried. I was like, even though I'm wearing, like, Master Rank gear, tempered monsters could be very extreme. They weren't. They were actually totally fine. And then I found a quest with, like, triple tempered monsters. It was a tempered Lunestra, a tempered Teostra, and a tempered Gigante. I was like, that sounds rough, actually. That sounds really rough to do those all together at the same time, because they're not easy. They were. And just my gear is just so overwhelming that you just stun them in a couple of hits. You know, obviously there's scaling there with how much damage you do versus reaching their threshold. So it was actually totally fine. And that unleashed another mantle, which I think actually was the temporal or the rock steady. Now, the rock steady I was so happy about getting. The rock steady mantle prevents blast damage, which is one of the issues I was having with Brackers, and also stops you flinching, which is another huge problem I've had throughout the game, is just some monsters just knock you to the floor and can kill you while you're just crawling around. This puts a stop to that, which is fantastic. And I still want to... I actually got a couple of brace gems. I want to know if that also prevents this knockdown effect, because it's being CC'd in this game is the most frustrating thing I deal with. I could deal with heavy damage, I could deal with rapid monsters, but just my character just being CC'd and helpless, especially for long periods of time, which can be up to, like, it feels like 12 seconds, is forever, and you're just like, I'm dead. There's nothing I do. I'm not down. I can't get up. So I'm hoping that prevents that. I'm going to science that today. So that was a really fun experience of getting all these mantles, and then I asked again, so now do I have all the mantles? No. But the decree was sent down. It's like, to find the other mantles does require knowing just how you get them at this point, because otherwise you're just going to be doing stuff forever. So that's in terms of the mantle farm, that's where we're up to, as to whether go and get more of them. There's apparently more. There was feedbacks like they're not great ones. They're just like extra bonus ones you can get. So I don't know where I want them, but I have the fireproof, which is huge. Like, the fireproof one was mega. So I want to upgrade those to the Fireproof Plus and the Rocksteady Plus and the Temporal Plus, so I can gem them up and get some extra benefits out of them. They're supposed to be pluses, so I want to get those things. I did find out some more new styles of mechanics, which was very interesting to me. I'm going to talk about the one that I just don't quite understand yet, and I'm trying to figure it out. So I discovered two things I think of note to you guys. One, how the daze mechanic works. So there's two things, right? There's the flinch, I think it's called, where they drool, and there's also knocking them down and they'll lay on the floor. I noticed that I was able to knock one down, damage it as it was getting it up, and then the final hit knocked it down again. But sometimes that doesn't happen. So what I predict is how it works in the background. This is just for the nerds of the game to think about, or probably know the answer to, is that there's, if you think of it like a cup, and you or a glass, and you pour water into it, and once that water reaches the top, it will fall down. But if you overfill it, it empties, but it's trapped in an animation where it can't fall down because it's already fallen down, and it empties and starts refilling again. And so if you do it, if you hit that, if you fill that glass and it falls down, and then you start filling it up again while it's laid down, but it's still laid down so it can't fall down again, it just empties. So you've triggered it, but it can't activate. And then the glass is empty again when you come back up, so it's back up for a while. And I think that's what's happening in the background with certain effects, because one thing I managed to do, and I can't remember which monster it was, is I was able to knock it down. It stood up. I knocked it down as it stood up again, and then it got flinched at the back end of it. I basically CC'd the monster for like 30, 40 seconds or something like that. Really crazy. But I have noticed that, like, the damage scaling on other monsters is that it stands up and it takes a while to get back to something like a knockdown, which makes me think that it constantly, like, fills and empties, but depending on what's the animation or the thing that's happening at the time, it's like if you flinch it and fill, because they're separate glasses, right? To flinch it is one glass, to knock it down is another. So if you fill both of those up at the same time, they both empty, only one can be active, and it'll start again to create a pacing of them not being chain CC'd. I bring this up because I think it's probably quite interesting that you can potentially, if you know the values and you know, like, you've scienced the crap out of it, you could probably chain stun some of these monsters in an endless fashion. I think that might be possible based on what I saw yesterday. The second thing, mounting. Okay. Up until this point, I have been working on the idea that mounting a monster has a DR, or a diminishing return, which means once you do it, you can't do it again for a certain amount of time. It has like an internal cooldown on it. It's like, okay, you mounted the monster. That means there's 60 seconds or a minute and a half or some time before you could do it again. At one point, I thought it was only mountable once per area because they move around to different environments. But I found out later that's not the case. But yesterday, I didn't expect to... I mounted a monster. I brought it down. And then just happened to be on a ledge and jumped off and attacked it and remounted it and did it again. So that is not the case. However, I really struggled to repeat this, which makes me think a number of things are happening. Either, and this is my guesses right now, either you can only mount a certain body part each time and then they get a cooldown. So if you, like, jump and smash the head and mount the head, you can't mount the head immediately again. But you can mount, say, the back or the tail. That can happen. My other theory is that some of the monsters work differently. Some can be chain mounted, some can't. My other theory is that it is on a diminishing return, like wall banging, because what I've noticed is that you can wall bang quite easily, but if you can do it a second time. However, if you try and turn the monster, it will auto enrage, and that means it can't be wall banged. Like, you can, so it's like, how many times are you changing its direction is like limited. So let's say you can max turn a monster 4 times, right? Because that's be a full 360. So if your first one, you have to move it 3 times, you've used 3 of those turns to wallbang it, and then you go back up and you try and move it once, that's the 4, it's just going to go, no. I had so many times yesterday while trying to do chain wallbangs where it enraged while I was doing it. And I'm like, right. So it's something like that. So the quicker you can get, if you're more careful about when you go for the wallbang, so you're not having to reposition the monster, perhaps then you can do wallbang quite easily. But if you do a lot on one, you better hope on your last one that you're really aiming at a wall already and it won't work. Something along those lines. So those are some nerdy stuff that I'm messing with. But ultimately, I had a great day. We fought a mix of very easy and some moderate difficult bosses, and felt really good about it. One thing I did find out is one of my optional things was to do a Brachydos. It was a master rank Brachydos, not raging Brachydos. I just suck at that fight. That was such a relief. I can't express to you guys. It was such a relief. I was like, okay, the problem is actually I'm just terrible at this fight. This fight is very erratic. It's all over the place. It has huge AoE on its explosions and things. That actually cheers me up a little bit because I did really well on other things of a similar profile, right, of like difficulty, and it was fine. So my war that I'm going into today is against Raging Brachydos to get through this. But I definitely think of all the fights in the game so far, my actual worst one, for whatever reason, right, might be my own personal playstyle or whatever it is, or the nature of the boss. I don't know how this boss is reflected in the community, is like people really hate this boss, or perhaps they think it's fine. But for me, I am not good at it. I'm going to have to overcome that, and we're going to have to win. So I'm hoping that next time I speak to you guys, Raging Brachydos is in the dirt. Either that or I'm in for hours of pain and misery today. I don't know. I'll see you then. All right, guys. Bye-bye.